Okay. All right, well, we'll go ahead and get started. So thanks for coming today for Help I Need Volunteers. We're not going to talk about volunteer recognition or retention. Those are really important topics too, but in an hour I can't really cover any one of them very well if we try to split it up into three. So I'm only going to talk about volunteer recruitment, and I'll do another webinar later about retention and recognition. So look for that. But at this point, the only thing we're going to focus on is how in the world do I get more volunteers in the door? So we're going to start off here. I have a little survey for you. Excuse me. Do you have a volunteer recruitment plan in place? Please choose your answer and submit. I'll give you like 30 seconds to answer that. All right, everybody answer?
Colleen?
Yes.
This is Toddy. See, it's showing I'm connected. It's showing I'm having full connection, but I've got nothing.
Okay, so you can't even get the email either. Okay. Do you want to just listen in and I'll try to describe what's on the slides, and then when you are able to see it, you can watch the recording then after the fact too.
Sounds good. Okay.
Okay, sounds good. I
was having problems.
Sorry, go ahead.
And I was having problems with the most recent email link, and so I went to an older email from you, and that link worked.
And that one worked. Did anybody else have trouble?
No.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, I would say you could try another email link. Are you getting email even, Patty? Or is it just your internet connection?
I was this morning, yeah.
But
I
not
don't
now?
know. We've had lots of trouble out here, though, so I'm not surprised.
Okay.
But that's
well,
fine.
I'm sorry, but if
no.
If you just follow along.
No problem.
Okay. So I just asked a survey question. Do you have a volunteer recruitment plan in place? Patty, do you?
No.
I'm sorry. No. Okay. So it looks like most of us do not, and a few of us do have a volunteer recruitment plan. So the first thing you'd like to do is plan. But we're going to talk about what a volunteer is anyway. And maybe think about a volunteer as beyond somebody who can provide services to help you out, to fill in your budget gaps, that sort of thing. But think about a volunteer as a major donor. If you think about 1 hour of a volunteer service in Wisconsin last year was valued at $22.48. And you figure that volunteer donated, say, 3 hours of their time each week. So in a year, they donated 78 hours of their time. And if you do the math, 78 times $22.48 is roughly $1,750. So if you got a check for $1,750, wouldn't you think that person was really generous, right? You'd be really excited about that. So if you kind of think of your volunteer in that same way, have that same opinion about your volunteers, and treat them as unpaid staff members, they will be more likely to volunteer with you, to continue with you, and when you show that how much you value them and the services that they're providing, they have a lot more fun, and they'll tell their friends, and it just kind of, it's like a snowball effect. So it really helps you to create a good volunteer atmosphere. So if you treat volunteers as unpaid staff members, don't treat them like volunteers. Remember, volunteers give the time of their lives. They don't have to be there. They don't have to do this. But if they really appreciate and enjoy what they're doing and see the value in your cause, they are the people you want in the door. So they're more than volunteers, right? They're recruiters for your organization. They're ambassadors. They're going to go out into the community and tell people, if they had a good time or if they had a bad time, they're going to tell people about it. So you want to make sure that your volunteers have the right messages, that they're telling people the right things about your organization and getting more people to come in. Did you know that 67% of volunteers give both their time and cash donations or in-kind donations? Volunteers donate 10 times more money than non-volunteers. So these are some things that you want to cultivate relationships around volunteers because they really do support your organization in many, many ways. There we go. So if you understand your prospective volunteer, you have your matures, who are the people that were born before 1945, so they would be 71 and older, and your baby boomers who were born between 46 and 64. They're 52 to 70 years of age. They are your primary groups of people that are volunteering. A little bit of information about them, like 77% of the people 71 and older give to charities. 66% of the boomers give to charities. Your mature volunteers really like things in print, newspapers, flyers. They don't use a whole lot of email, although, there's exceptions to the rule. They do appreciate direct mailings to them. Your baby boomers are using more technology. 93% use the internet on a regular basis, so your things like your social medias and email and things like that are a good way to communicate with them, although, again, not everybody likes that, so, you have to tailor everything to the people that you're asking. They still like things in traditional print. They like social recognition events, and they like to be professional advisors, take all those years of experience in the job and put it to work helping nonprofit organizations. So it just kind of gives you a picture of the people who are out there that are willing to volunteer. A little bit more information about them. The people that are 71 and older, the matures, they are brand loyal, so kind of once they get hooked up with an organization, they're going to continue to support and give their time and tell people about the organization. They're very loyal to your cause. They're typically conservative or traditional. They don't want to be seen as old. They have quite a bit of money, but they're concerned about rising costs of everything, just, I would say, like everybody else. Your messaging to them is to respond to leadership and formal messages. Use inclusive language like we and us, not I and them and they, and give them motivational type messages like we respect you, we respect your years of experience, your knowledge, expertise, something along those lines. For your baby boomers, they tend to be extravagant spenders. They are the sandwich generation. They are spending to maintain their vitality or health or to be seen as younger. They do want to be seen as cutting edge, so that's where the technology and all that comes in, but they want to volunteer. They need to be seen as individuals and not a big, giant group of people. They want to share what's good with other people, so that's where your messaging and everything comes in. If they think your cause is worthy, they're going to tell others. And they like motivational messages like, you're important to our success, we need you. So they get that feeling that they belong, okay? So if you look at just a picture of Wisconsin volunteers, by age group, the people who donated the most time were your 75 and older, followed by 65 to 74, 55 to 64. So there's your baby boomers kind of coming into that group there are your second runners-up. And then the 45 to 54 came in at 48 hours. Now, this is for a year of service. And this was done in 2010 was when they were doing this. So if you look at that same information, you look at their rate of volunteering, the group that's 45 to 54 is volunteering at the highest rate. So you take all of that information into consideration when you're developing your volunteer recruitment strategy to determine who are the people I'm targeting, who is my audience, what am I going to do to reach out to that particular group of people so that I can get people who believe in our mission and want to volunteer with this organization. So with that little bit of background information, I have to tell you recruitment's the third step. You're thinking, yeah, why is it the third step? Shouldn't it be the first step? Well, if it's not the first step, then what is the first step? Well, that is know why you want volunteers. Why do you need them? You don't just need a body to come in and do some stuff. You need to know why you want them in the door. What do you have for them to do? How are they going to help further your mission? So you need to ask yourself if you would still want volunteers if you could hire someone for the job. If you had all the money in the world and you didn't have to worry about budget constraints, would you want a volunteer to do the things that volunteers are doing, or would you just hire someone? There's some benefits to having a paid staff person. They show up because they want their paycheck. Volunteers don't have to be there, so they can be a little unreliable, but you have to determine exactly why you want your volunteers there. So a lot of people think that nonprofits just recruit volunteers because they don't have enough money to pay somebody to do the job, but that's not really it. The volunteers help to further your mission because we all know that it costs money to maintain a volunteer program, to run it, to screen, all of those things. It is not free to have volunteers come and help you. And you want to make sure that when you're doing your messaging that you don't give the impression that volunteers are there, just because you don't have enough money, so we need a volunteer to come in the organization and help us out. You want a message that says instead, we have volunteers come in to allow us to stretch our budget way beyond what we would otherwise be able to afford. Or maybe volunteers want to spend every dollar we have and then do even more. So, when you look at the opinion, the impression they're getting, it just might just be implicit. It might not be something that you're saying to anybody, but you want to make sure that that impression that they're getting from your organization is that you value their time, their service, and what they're doing. So know why you want volunteers. Another aspect of that is, what is your stated purpose? Is the volunteer there to meet your critical community needs? Are you enhanced by the services provided by your volunteers? Multiple volunteers can bring a variety of skills that you can't get in all one person. So, there's a lot of benefits to having volunteers help out. In addition to thinking about the way you talk about the value of volunteers and crafting that message, your organization should consider creating a mission statement for your volunteer engagement to guide your employees in how they should think about volunteers, to guide current volunteers in thinking about their role and their value at your organization, and to show potential volunteers the kind of culture they can expect at your organization with regards to volunteers. So the mission statement should be at least on the page of the organization's website. It should be included in your employee volunteer policies and procedures, and all new employees and volunteer orientation should include that. So you're thinking, well, I already got a mission statement. Why do I need another one? But it's just to help the volunteers to understand what kind of things they're doing and why you need volunteers. Why is this important? How are they furthering the mission of your organization? So just some possible suggestions is, if you said, like, Faith in Action of Adams County, we engage volunteers to provide supportive services to elderly Adams County residents to help seniors maintain their independence at home. So you're just adding the word volunteers in there. They're providing the services, but it helps the volunteer, the potential volunteer, to understand exactly what it is the mission of your organization and how they fit into that mission. If your volunteer is part of your mission, they are an integral part of what you are doing. So it's not just like an add-on or something as, oh, gee whiz, we can't afford to hire somebody. So you kind of get the feel for that? Mm-hmm. Okay. So next, how do you balance the needs of volunteers with the needs of your organization, and what are the needs of each? So here's just a scenario. A mom calls you and says that her son needs to do 10 hours of community service. Do you just drop everything and try to come up with something for him to do? You have a corporation call you and say they need a group activity this Saturday for their volunteers, and you really want to get an in with this local business. Do you drop everything and try to come up with a group activity? Do you scramble to find things for people to do? Where do you draw the line? What is in the best interest of your organization? What is in the best interest of the volunteers that you might be employing? You should think about these things and write down your answers to these questions before you begin recruiting volunteers, so that you're not running around, willy-nilly trying to figure out, how do I get this volunteer in the door, because we're so desperate. I don't really care if you fit or if you believe in our mission, but I'm going to find something for you to do. You don't want to give that impression. So you need to have a plan and a policy that states exactly where you are in these kinds of situations, so that you don't have situations where, okay, you're going to have this group of people come in. Are we just going to skip screening them? It normally would take me a couple of days to get that done, and there's not enough time, but I'm desperate to get volunteers in the door, so do I waive all of that background check and everything? And those are kinds of things that you don't want to do. Okay? So the second step, after you know why you want volunteers, is to design valuable volunteer assignments. Take the time to do this. It really is a critical step, and it helps you to be as effective as you can be in your recruitment efforts. If you know exactly what you need a volunteer to come in and do, and you draw this all up and you spell it all out, the people who are going to apply for those volunteer assignments know they have the skills or they don't. So they're not going to come in and say, well, let's see, you need volunteer. Well, I don't have a car, and you need drivers. I take the bus. I'll just pick somebody up with the bus, and we'll ride the bus together. And that's not what you're looking for. So you spell it out. I mean, that's obviously incredibly simple kind of a description, but spell it out, exactly what you want and what you're expecting, what kind of skills they need, And, then there's no surprises. So if you need somebody to do something very simple and limited, it might seem like it's a waste of time to write up an office support volunteer who's going to stuff envelopes and to draw up a volunteer description of that position. Do it anyway because it helps you in your recruiting and designing your materials for recruiting and pretty much every step along the line. So as you go through that, look at it just as an exercise in task analysis. So instead of asking what can volunteers do for us, ask what needs to be done. What kind of work do I have to get done here? Because we know most volunteers do work in limited chunks of time, right? So you just look at the services that your organization provides, create a meaningful assignment that can be accomplished in 1 or 2 hour intervals. Maybe it's weekly, bi-weekly, monthly. I mean, it's pretty obvious you need drivers, you need people who do housekeeping, raking, outdoor chores, indoor chores, that kind of thing. But if you have it spelled out as to what they can do, then, they know they're acting within the parameters of your program. It's not enough to say, we need volunteers to help seniors. You need to be more specific, more concrete. And, like, for instance, you wouldn't want to recruit somebody for driving who, like I said, relies on public transportation. You want to recruit people who have a car. And maybe you don't want to recruit people who have big pickup trucks that are hard to step up into. It's just things that are common sense. So when you're crafting those messages, you take all of those things into account. And after you have written them down as the job description, now you know what kinds of things you're advertising. So what you want to think of is, what are we doing now that we would like to do more of in terms of recruiting new volunteers? If I had another person to do this, I could do these other things, or we could accomplish more, we could reach more people. What unmet needs do your care receivers have that you can't help with, but a volunteer could? And these are the kinds of things you're thinking of as you're creating these job descriptions. What would support the staff in their work? If somebody just answered the phone and took messages, would that be really helpful? What kinds of things would make it easier for people to get their job done or make their jobs a little simpler or flow better? What might we do differently if we had more skills or time available to us? So, again, think about it in the terms of unlimited cash. If you had an unexpected donation came in the mail for $500,000 and you had to use it all in 1 year, how would you spend that? What kinds of things would you do to improve your service delivery, expand your service area, whatever it is, and think about that in terms of volunteers. If the volunteers were your $500,000, what would you do to spend that in 1 year? Any comments or questions at this point? Okay. The slide is not displaying. Here we go. So as you're defining these roles, think about what the volunteer is doing. Write up a job description. Think about whether or not the volunteer is going to do the same thing each and every time they come in or visit with a person or whatever it is. If the volunteer needs a change, maybe the assignment's not going so well, or they're really tired of stuffing envelopes, they want to do something else, how do they go about getting that type of change? And so you would spell all of that out as you go along. Then as you're setting expectations of the position, what kind of experience level do you need? What types of skills do you need? What level of skills do you need? If you want somebody to come in and answer the phone, do they need to know how to operate a multi-line telephone? Is it something you can teach them pretty quickly? Do they need to know how to type? All of those different kinds of things. Or, unlike me, if they're working with a senior, they don't talk really, really fast. They slow down. They take time. They breathe in between their statements, and they listen well. You're looking for even those less concrete type skills, the more intangible stuff, like good listener, things like that, and you spell that out in your job description. Make sure you distinguish between how long the opportunity is. Is it a one-time event? Is it going to be something that's ongoing? Will it be, like every other Tuesday? Is it just seasonal, cutting the grass, whatever? Go through that and spell all of those things out. Now, in the email that I sent to everybody, there's a volunteer job description form that you can use to kind of help you through all of this, so look for that. Also, if there's training or other opportunities for the volunteer to learn, include those. And who's their boss? Who is going to give them the information they need to do what you have assigned them to do? Is there somebody else who's in charge of volunteers who, for different types of volunteers? Maybe there's one person in charge of the volunteer drivers, somebody else is in charge of volunteer visitors. Just spell those kinds of details out, and also think about benefits to the volunteer. List those on there. Maybe it's mileage reimbursement, additional training, build your resume, give the gift of independence, any of those kinds of things that you can think of that would be perceived as a benefit to the potential volunteer. So here's just some key components, and these are all on that form: a title, the description of the project or the purpose of their assignment, their responsibilities or tasks, what they're supposed to be achieving, their outcomes or goals if that's appropriate, training and support if you need to provide training on how to vacuum or mop a floor or what have you. List all of those kinds of things in there. And then think about who's responsible for creating these job descriptions. It shouldn't be just the volunteer coordinator. It really should be your staff, possibly a group from your board. Other volunteers who are doing the job, you can ask them for input as to, creating these types of volunteer assignments, what would make the most sense, and bring all of that in together to create these. Other things you should consider are some written policies, your purpose statement, a definition of what your organization sees a volunteer as, your risk management, if they're acting within the parameters of your volunteer opportunity, they're covered by your insurance. If they do something outside of that, are you doing criminal background checks so that you're not bringing in people who might be untrustworthy, that kind of stuff. A listing of volunteer rights and responsibilities, a confidentiality agreement would be a really good thing to have everybody sign. What kinds of conduct would be grounds for dismissal? What would be appropriate interaction with clients, a dress code if that applies, any kind of health requirements, they have to lift 50 pounds or something. A volunteer handbook is always a great thing. Include in there information about liability insurance, what to do if there's a problem and they need to fill out an incident report, who should they contact, how do they get that, all of those kinds of things that go a little bit beyond the actual service provision, but things that need to be considered and put into place. Most of you, I assume, have all of these things already. You have some kind of a volunteer handbook, risk management policies, you do a criminal background check, you interview the volunteer, you go over the handbook, that kind of thing. So it's not as if you have to create a whole lot of stuff, just, some things to think about. Usually you find out there's something you're missing when something happens, an event happens, and you don't have any way to handle that. So other things to think about, too, is like application and screening. Here's some websites where you can look for criminal background checks. You do an interview, but not training when you bring somebody in. So you want to find out, is this person a good fit for your organization, and is your organization a good fit for that potential volunteer? So you don't just bring them in right away for training. Maybe you do an interview over the phone, or as part of your intake application, you're getting some of the information you need, and then when you bring them in, you're kind of screening them at that point. But however it's done, you need to determine whether or not they're a good fit. What are the eligibility requirements for volunteering? Do they have to be 18? Do they have to have a car? What kinds of things like that come into play. They can't have a criminal history, or if they have a criminal offense, it has to be 10 years old, or anything like that. That's where you're going to want to put that into a policy. And then as you're going through all of that, you're going to think about what you want to teach them in an orientation and training, and what's the difference between orientation and training. And I'll talk about that in just a second. And then the last part is record keeping. What kind of information about each volunteer, the assignments, how are you going to evaluate them? What kind of stuff do you need to keep track of? How can you evaluate their performance? What kinds of things do you think would be valuable for tracking, maybe in terms of grant writing, funding, any of those kinds of things, or even just feedback for your board? So think of all of those things as you're writing these job descriptions, so you know what it is right up front that you need to track, have in place, all of that kind of stuff before you get started recruiting. So the difference between orientation and training is that orientation is going to make somebody familiar with your mission and the program, and determine if the program is a good fit for the volunteer. So you'd talk about just the program overall, how it's organized, volunteer opportunities, who you're serving, what the general expectations are. You might do it on the phone. You might have them come in for an interview. Most of the time it's a one-on-one. It's not usually in a group, I would think, because you can get a better feel. But if it's a small group, you could do a group meeting and talk about these things. When you're doing training, you're teaching somebody something beyond your mission. It's to increase their knowledge, develop their skills, increase their awareness, maybe of a proper attitude, or maybe elder abuse or something like that. You're showing them what to look for. So some possible topics for training might be your policies and guidelines, your expectations, maybe specific volunteer opportunity guidelines. Like if you're driving someone, everybody has to wear their seatbelt, and you're going to check to make sure, your heat works, your air conditioning works in the summertime, your taillights work, all of those kinds of things. So just some suggestions for that. So now we're up to the third step. The first step was to know why you weren't volunteers. The second step was to design the volunteer assignments. And now the third one is to develop and implement your recruitment plan. So here's where you design the materials and get started recruiting. So for each volunteer job description that you've already created, you're going to brainstorm potential sources for people having those qualifications. So since we all need volunteer drivers, why don't we just look at recruiting a volunteer driver? So you're going to brainstorm some potential places for people where you can find drivers, right? So you want to just shout out a few examples of places where you'd find somebody who's a driver. Anybody?
A community center.
A community center, that's a good place. Other places?
Civic organizations.
Sure, civic organizations. What else? Anybody? Okay. How about car washes? You're looking for people who have a car and drive, right? So we're going to get really basic. How about car washes? Maybe drive-ups at the bank, fast food restaurants, pharmacy, any place that has a drive-up. That's a potential spot where you could find a volunteer driver. Car showrooms or dealerships, car repair shops. How about parking lots? You put flyers on car windshields, car parts stores, car shows. I'm sorry? I didn't know if somebody else was talking. But just some ideas like that. You're going to sit and brainstorm places where you're going to find these potential volunteers. So you might say traffic court, right? But you wouldn't want to recruit people who are in traffic court because obviously they wouldn't be a good fit, right? They're getting lots of tickets and they have to show up in court. But then again, you might want them to be a volunteer doing something else, but maybe not a volunteer driver. So you're going to sit and you're going to brainstorm some places where you might find volunteers. And so for each of these potential sources of volunteers, you're going to select the most appropriate technique to communicate your message. So is it going to be in print? Are you going to appear on TV or on the radio or in the newspaper? Is it going to be a flyer or a bulletin insert for a church or maybe a bag insert at the grocery store? You'll think about, okay, at community centers, what would be the most effective way to recruit volunteers? Do you want to use a poster or a flyer, a takeaway? Are you giving a presentation at the community center to a group of people? Then you might want to have something for them to take home with them. Same thing, civic organizations, churches, any of those kinds of places. You'll tailor your message to where you are recruiting. And then do it. Create your method of advertising and then get it out there. And then you need to be prepared for applicants. So as you're going through all of this, if you don't already have a welcoming system for interviewing, screening, and onboarding new volunteers, you want to have that in place before you start recruiting them. So as soon as somebody says, yes, I would like to be your next volunteer driver, you don't have to say, well, in 2 weeks I'll be ready for you to come in and get started. You want to have something for them to do immediately. Okay? So just kind of, common sense kinds of things. So as you go through this volunteer recruitment process, you're thinking about who would be interested. You've already come up with the qualifications. You're going to make it appealing, and you're going to try to think of ways or excuses, barriers that volunteers might come up with, and you're going to address those. So knowing, like, do you take an application before you do an interview? How do you screen? What's your policy? So if anybody asks questions about how do I become a volunteer, you've already got all of that figured out, and you've answered any of their questions as far as what might keep them from volunteering. You have a response for that. So think about your benefits, what's in it for the volunteer, and what are the features of your volunteer opportunity. So here's an example. If you think about a store that's open 24 hours a day, 24 hours a day is a feature. The benefit is being able to shop anytime you want, right? If you say like a dual airbag in your car, that's a safety feature. The benefit is you're protected in the event of a crash. So you're going to want to look at like volunteer driving. The features are anytime you're available, Monday through Friday, 9 to 2, it's on your schedule. You volunteer as little or as much as you want. The benefit is it fits into your time schedule and you feel good about helping a senior. Okay? You could say a benefit is improving your health, lowering your blood pressure, decreasing depression. Other benefits would be like mileage reimbursement, volunteer rewards. The features are about the what and the benefits are about the why. Okay? So you just kind of wrap that up into your marketing. And as you're developing your marketing, you're also thinking about your mission, because it's all about your mission. You need these volunteers to help you to accomplish that. So do you know your mission statement? I assume everybody does. Do you know why your mission is important? And who does your mission serve? And can you articulate that to your volunteers so that they know what your mission is, who you're serving, what's being done, why this is important? They might not know it to the depth that you do, but so that when they tell somebody, yeah, I'm volunteering for Faith in Action, they can give that person, well, I don't know what that is. What's that all about? And they can give them a little bit of information about it, and they're, giving correct information about the organization. So find out what volunteers find appealing about your mission, and then use that and present that in some of your advertising. It helps to catch people's attention, pull on their heartstrings. It's impossible to make the volunteer experience count if you don't know why you're volunteering. What's the mission? Why are you doing this? There we go. So craft a powerful message. Share your benefits and features. Keep it simple. There's too many words people will walk by and they aren't going to read it. Make it attractive. It's got to catch their eye. Use motivational appeal. Explain who's being served and why, the details of what you need done, and the contact information. But keep the details kind of to a minimum, because in your interview or just talking with the person, you can answer additional questions. If you get too much and get too wordy, people aren't going to read it. And be sure to offer both phone contact information, email, Facebook, whatever you think is appropriate, so that people have multiple methods of contacting you. And include a call to action. Tell them to get started now. So different types of recruitment materials, obviously brochures, flyers, posters, inserts, speaking to groups, any of those kinds of things. Radio, TV. Anybody think of anything else beyond that? No? Okay. So it doesn't have to cost a lot to look appealing. Your goal is to look good, but not expensive. Recruit somebody, maybe you can get a volunteer in who has graphic arts talents to lay out your text and select a type style and present the best look for you. Be honest with any paid artist or volunteer about your right of final approval. So if they create something you really don't like, or you think it's conveying the wrong message, that you have the right to reject that and you're not going to print it. Think about like various illustrations or pictures, photographs, what they reflect on your organization. Examine it very carefully for any kind of message that conveys. Do people look like they're having fun? Are they working hard? Are they posing for the camera? Are they diverse, maybe in terms of age, race, sex, whatever it is that you're looking for in a volunteer. And then when you create these, don't ever use the word volunteer. Try to come up with other words. You don't want to say, like, we need volunteers, because nobody cares what you need. If you're looking for volunteers too, again, that's the kiss of death. You may as well just push them right out the door, because people don't want to volunteer with the we need. Tell them about what's in it for me. Why am I doing this? Motivate me to be your volunteer by using my emotions, my sense of accomplishment, giving me an opportunity to learn, or because your cause is really great and it's worth my time. And do that in your message with pictures, make it attractive and honest, and avoid saying, we need a volunteer. As you're doing all of these things, you want to think also about color. If it's a poster, maybe you thought pink looks really good. Pink is usually seen as a feminine color and might give the idea that you only need female volunteers for that assignment. Day glow colors usually appeal to teens and make people think of teenagers. So, the assignment they might just walk by and pass up that poster thinking, well, it's not for me. So think about that when you're thinking about your target audience. What kind of paper, what color of paper, what kind of print style, what pictures, all of that stuff crafts the message. If you think about McDonald's, for instance, you probably see at least a minimum of one McDonald's ad every day, don't you? McDonald's does a spectacular job of advertising and pushing their products. Just by seeing the golden arches, it's McDonald's. It means McDonald's. They've created that brand. They're selling it. You know exactly what you're going to get when you go in there. And that's kind of what you're trying to achieve with your advertising as well, is people are going to feel good about what they're doing. When they see your logo, they know this is a good thing. It's for seniors, that kind of stuff. So you're thinking of all of those things when you're crafting your message and preparing your recruitment materials. You might also want to think about having maybe a tear-out sheet on the bottom or a pocket of takeaway pages that people, seeing your poster can take that and it's got contact information, and that way they're not taking your poster and leaving nothing in its place. You might want to go back to wherever it is that you're putting up your posters or flyers or that and refresh them. Make sure that they're up to date and current with whatever your needs are, and that they haven't run out. Just all of that kind of stuff is what you're going to look at. Any questions on that? Okay. So in your posters, use phrases, positive phrases like "get involved," not "we need volunteers." Become a part of something really great, or in just 1 hour, you can become a hero. Or my favorite is "drives people happy," and use that as an ad for volunteer drivers. Definitely going to catch my attention. They drive people happy. My kids drive me nuts, right? Who drives people happy? So it would catch their attention and get them to at least continue to read it. That's what you want to do, is just kind of get them hooked so that they read it. So here's a few posters that I've come across. I don't necessarily like every aspect about these, but what I like about this one is it says, "Lend a helping hand, make history come alive." Okay, I like that. That's catchy. I wouldn't say volunteers are needed. I would go with that "lend a helping hand" and then the information about the volunteer opportunity, because that catches my attention. It doesn't make me think, oh, volunteering is hard, or I don't have the skills, or whatever it is. And here's another one. This summer, pick on someone smaller than you are. And this was an advertisement to volunteer in Atlanta's summer youth programs. Another one, you can help out anywhere, but you belong at the YMCA. And then it has a little bit of text about how you can do something good at the Y. All of these are really great messages, and they don't say, hey, come out and volunteer. We need someone with the boldness of a pioneer, the resourcefulness of an inventor, and the faith of a sword follower. This is an advertisement for Peace Corps members. And it gives a little bit of information. It's not very much. It's just a bookmark. But, you have to think about where is this being distributed. I really like the headline on this one because it catches your attention, makes you want to read more. It doesn't give me enough to answer, well, what is this all about? So I have to read more to find out what is this all about. Here's a couple of other flyers. I'm going to talk about these twice. One, this was just a friendly visitor program for seniors, and one was what's a little time between friends, share a moment, be a friend. Really simple, not a whole lot of information. I don't know why there's no contact information on it. That would be the one thing I would include. The other flyer, be a friend, by placing a simple phone call to the Friendly Visitor Service, you can help someone who may need a friend. Share a moment, be a friend. So again, just really, really simple, not anything too earth-shattering there. This one, I'm 17, on probation, and I can't read. And they need volunteers to help out with reading, teaching somebody how to read. Draw from your past, reserve our future. Volunteer with the Park Authority Conservation Division. Rather than saying volunteer, I would try to come up with something different to include this draw from your past to preserve your future, rather than using that word volunteer. Get involved. In 1 hour you can do this. Something like that that doesn't use the word volunteer. Okay. So now you've made these terrific posters. Now what? Well, now you got to figure out where it is you're going to put them, and that's where the whole brainstorming and everything comes into place. As you talked about, civic organizations, the community center, these are great places to put your posters or leave your flyers or brochures or what have you. And so that's what you're going to think about is, what kind of volunteer will I get at the community center? They're going to be primarily seniors. And what kinds of things do seniors like to do? So maybe if you're looking for new clients, that would be a good place to advertise that need. But as well, volunteers, what kinds of things would those people be interested in doing? And that's what you're going to tailor your message to for that particular location. So, little things that you can print on your computer and that are probably the cheapest way to go. Again, it just has to look nice. It doesn't have to look expensive. So you come up with your plan. Now, we're coming back to this one being a friendly visitor. What I wanted to tell you is how they did this campaign. In the first month, each church was given the first poster on the left. And then at the same time, a small brochure was distributed to each church in bulk, just explaining their program and what they do, and people could pick those up. Then in the second month, the poster was changed to poster 2, Be a Friend. Then finally, there was this brown bag, and it's a picture of a brown lunch bag, and they had printed on it, Downtown Lunch Mates. Do you eat lunch alone? Every day there's an elderly person within 4 blocks of you eating lunch alone too. Why not get together and share a lunch? This spring for 6 weeks, 1 day each week, we invite you to bring your lunch, bring a smile, share your time, share yourself, be a lunch mate. And they left these in the park where they saw people eating lunch. So it was non-church public places near the park to catch people's attention, and because they were going to be bringing these seniors to the park, they were recruiting volunteers from where they already found people eating lunch. So if you think about it, they were kind of priming the crowd, so to speak, by giving these flyers out to the churches in the area and then giving the bags out to people who are already eating lunch there. They were promoting this program in a multi-fold way. I don't know what the right word would be to say it, but in multiple avenues they were taking to get volunteers in to do the same thing, but tailoring their message to the crowd that they were speaking to. So any questions, comments on this? Okay. Another thing you should think about is always having group opportunities available in case you get a youth group that wants to do something. If you have a list of miscellaneous opportunities for groups of people to do it, it doesn't have to be groups of 40. It could be groups of 2 or 3 or 5. But just make sure that you can engage different types of groups, whether they're teenagers or adults or what have you. You might have something available for a group that has many members that are too young to physically volunteer at your site. So maybe they could make cards, for Christmas gifts or, whatever it is. But, have those kinds of things defined and available so that, yes, if you have a group of volunteers, you don't have to turn them down and you don't have to scramble to come up with something for them to do. What if, and these kinds of things always happen, what if it turns out that the volunteer discovers he or she can't do the job as expected? Do you have a plan in place for that? They aren't really at the skill level they thought they were at. They can't physically do the job. They lost their driver's license, whatever it is. Their idea of a job well done doesn't match yours. In fact, it's not even close. So do you have a plan to redirect the volunteer into something that would better suit them, or refer them to another agency where they could volunteer, or sever that volunteer relationship? Excuse me. What if the volunteer just decides it isn't for them? So you need to think of those kinds of things too while you're working through your whole volunteer recruitment plan, so if something happens, you have an answer to that. What if the volunteer decides it just isn't for them? You should probably do an exit interview. You want to try to learn from the interview what kinds of things happened or didn't happen that would have made this a better situation or experience for the volunteer. Refer them to other agencies. Maybe you have a volunteer who really, really, really wants to deliver food, but you don't need any volunteers for that. So rather than saying, well, we don't have volunteers to deliver or volunteer opportunities for you at this time, refer them to Meals on Wheels or Mobile Meals or something like that in your area, because that will make them remember you, and they will really thank you for doing that. It gives them the opportunity to still give back to their community. And always try to end on a positive note and thank them for their service. If you refer to other agencies, and if you aren't doing this already, you really should start. It shows your willingness to partner with other community agencies. And when you can't serve the volunteers' needs, you point them out. Again, they won't forget it. And they'll send volunteers your way because you were so kind and gracious to them. They said, hey, well, we don't have what you're looking for, but over here they can. And you make those referrals. And that can help to build your volunteer base. So something good to keep in mind. After your volunteer has been onboarded, they've gone through orientation and all of your screenings and everything, and they're a full-fledged volunteer, you've given them their first assignment, it's always a good idea to touch base with them so you know how it went. Just ask them if they had a good experience, or if there's things they have questions about, concerns, make sure you remind them about their timesheets and that kind of stuff. If it was a group, call the group leader and thank them again. Ask if you can send a survey, and just follow up with people. That way they know that they're valued and you care about them in terms of your organization and your attitude towards volunteers. So continue your relationship with the volunteer. Schedule a second shift or another assignment for an individual volunteer. Follow up after that one. For groups, ask the leader if they could include them on their group opportunity email list, or ask them if they're open to volunteering again. If it's a business that wanted to volunteer with you, meet with their HR department and see if you can establish a continued relationship with them to get their employees volunteering on a regular basis with you. And then as you're recruiting, think about what do you want to accomplish. Again, who could do it? This is just a recap. Why should they volunteer with you? Where are they, and how will you attract them? And what's your message to your potential volunteers? So any questions? Everybody's very, very quiet today. I'm not hearing anybody here. Let's try again.
The conference has been unmuted.
Any questions from anybody? Okay. Well, if you don't have any questions right now and you think of something later, just send me an email or give me a call. You have the slides have been emailed to you. There's some additional materials. There is one thing that I would like to share with you. So I'm going to show you this here if I can remember how to get to it here. Oh, I don't think I can do it. Maybe I can. Here, we'll try that. Yes. Okay. So on Facebook, Interfaith Caregivers of Washington County has done a tremendous job of advertising their needs for volunteers. And they recently, I think yesterday, hosted an open house. And so they advertised. Can you see this? I'm going to double click on it to make, no, that's not really large, but hopefully you can see this. They had a pie open house, and they called it Easy as Pie. Becoming a volunteer driver is easy as pie. Find out how easy it is to enjoy a piece of pie on us. So they did this open house from 4 to 6 yesterday to bring in volunteers, and maybe not volunteer drivers, maybe volunteers who want to do other things. And their incentive was pie and a $100 chamber gift certificate. So a pretty cool way of trying to get some people to come in and learn more about your organization. Even if they don't volunteer, it gets the word out in the community. And if you look at their page, they have a wall in their office. Says Connecting Older Adults with Caring Volunteers Who Want to Lend a Helping Hand. And on this, they have pictures of volunteers in action, and they're labeled, and they put them on the puzzle pieces, putting that together. And this is just one of the collages that they have. They've done a lot with that. There was another one in here. So many of our smiles begin with you. Again, that's another wall. And they took all these puzzle pieces and pictures, and they put them together and had all of that displayed for their open house. So check it out. It's Interfaith Caregivers of Washington County. They do run a mobile meals program out of their office as well, and do all the same things that Faith in Action programs do, for seniors and disabled adults. Lots of really, really good ideas going on there. So check it out, and check out everybody else's Facebook pages too and their websites. It's a good way to find ideas and information, and maybe they'll come up with something that you hadn't thought of. If you go to the National Network's website, you can find other Faith in Action programs through their website. Their website is painful and not difficult to navigate, just really slow. And, you look at one of their links and then you have to start all over again with loading the map of the country and clicking on the state and all of that. But I have found a lot of really good ideas that way and have called some of these directors and talked with them to come up with some suggestions and, kind of get pointed in the right direction. Don't hesitate to talk to other volunteer coordinators and other program directors, because everybody's in the same boat and we're willing to share what we've learned. So feel free to do that. And again, if you have any questions, just contact me and I'd be happy to help in any way I can. And thank you very much for attending today. I really appreciate it.
The conference has been unmuted.
Thank you, Colleen.
Thanks, Colleen.
Thank you. Thank you. Have a good day, you guys.
You too.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.